Think about the last real fight you had with someone you love. There's a good chance money was somewhere in the room. Money is one of the most common things couples fight about and one of the biggest threads running through divorce. And yet it's the one subject almost none of us were ever taught to say out loud. We'll talk about almost anything before we'll talk about what's in the account. And here's the part nobody tells you. It isn't the money that does the damage. It's the silence around it. That's what I want to take apart with you today. Gently, no shame, both sides. So here's where we're going together in the next few minutes. First, I want to sit with why this one topic became so unspeakable and what that silence is quietly costing the people who love each other most. Then I'll walk you through 6 things that once you see them, you can't unsee. 1. Money really was the last taboo. 2. Where that silence actually came from, and it probably wasn't you. 3. Staying quiet doesn't cancel the fight. It just delays it and lets it grow. 4. Money fights are almost never about money. 5. Privacy and tact are real. Honesty isn't a spreadsheet striptease. And 6. The people who talk about it plainly, quietly pull ahead. And then at the end, I'll hand you the exact opening line to start the conversation tonight, without it turning into a fight. Let's start with how strange this really is when you say it plainly. You probably know your closest friend's relationship history, their health scares, their family drama. You've talked about death, about politics, about things that would make a stranger blush, but do you know what they earn? What they owe? Whether they're quietly terrified about retirement? Almost certainly not. Most of us were raised to treat money as more private than almost anything else about us, a number we'd sooner hide than our weight or our age. That rule got handed to us so early and so completely that we never even question it. We just obey it. And we pass it straight down to the next person. Now here's the quiet cost of that rule, and it's bigger than people think. When 2 people build a life together but can't talk plainly about money, they don't actually avoid the subject. They just make every decision in the dark. One person assumes. The other assumes something different. Small resentments collect in the corners where the honest conversation should have been. Nobody's the villain here. These are 2 people who love each other, both following a rule they never chose, both a little afraid of the same thing. And the silence they're keeping to protect the relationship is, slowly and invisibly, the thing putting the most strain on it. That's the whole knot we're going to untie. Point 1. Money really was the last taboo, and it's worth feeling just how odd that is. Over the last couple of generations, we've pulled almost everything else out into the open. We talk about mental health now. We talk about our relationships, our therapy, our childhoods, our bodies, our failures. Subjects that were once completely off limits at a dinner table are now normal podcast episodes. But money stayed locked in the vault. Ask a room full of friends what they weigh, and a few will tell you. Ask them what's in their checking account, and the temperature in the room drops. There's this unwritten agreement that a real number attached to a real person is somehow indecent. That to say, I make this much or I owe this much out loud is to break some deep social rule. And notice how the silence flows in both directions. People who don't have much stay quiet out of shame, terrified of being judged as failing. People who have plenty stay quiet too, worried they'll be seen differently, treated differently, resented. So everybody agrees, without ever discussing it, to just not go there. The problem is that a topic you refuse to discuss doesn't disappear. It just goes underground and gets more powerful. The taboo doesn't protect us from the discomfort of money. It hands all the power to the discomfort. And the first quiet act of taking that power back is simply noticing the rule exists. That this silence isn't natural, isn't inevitable, and isn't actually serving you. It's just a habit nobody chose, and habits can be changed. Point 2. Where does this silence actually come from? Because if we're going to change it, it helps to see that it probably didn't start with you. Kids learn money by watching, not by being told, and most of us learned it by watching the door close. You picked up the lesson without a single word being spoken. Maybe the bills got discussed in low voices after you'd gone to bed. Maybe there was a tense, quiet energy at the end of the month that you could feel but never got explained. Maybe money was simply never mentioned at all. And that absence taught you just as loudly that this is a subject we don't touch. Whatever the version, you absorbed a money script, a set of quiet beliefs about what money means, whether there's ever enough, whether it's safe to talk about, and what kind of person you are around it. And you absorbed it before you could read, before you could argue with it, before you had any way of knowing it was even happening. It just became the water you swim in. That's why it feels less like an opinion you hold and more like a fact about the world. And here's the part that matters most, the part that lets everybody off the hook a little. Your parents were almost certainly running a script they inherited too. The tight-lipped parent isn't a bad person keeping secrets. They're usually someone who was handed silence by their own parents, who got it from theirs, going back further than anyone can remember. Nobody sat down and decided that families shouldn't talk about money. It just got passed hand to hand, generation to generation, like an heirloom nobody remembers buying. Which means the silence isn't a personal flaw in you or in them. It's an inheritance. And the beautiful thing about an inherited script is that once you can actually see it written down, you get to decide whether to keep following it or to be the person in your family who quietly writes a new one. Point 3, and this one's the big reframe. We stay quiet because we think silence keeps the peace. It doesn't. Silence doesn't cancel the fight. It just delays it and charges interest the whole time it waits. Here's how it actually plays out. Two people avoid the money conversation because it feels tense, and dodging it gives them a little hit of relief. The topic goes away for tonight. But the issue underneath doesn't go anywhere. The mismatched spending, the quiet worry, the assumption one person made that the other never agreed to, all of it keeps sitting there, and it keeps growing. So instead of one calm conversation about a small thing while it's still small, you get one enormous, overdue explosion about a huge thing months or years later. The fight you were so sure you avoided didn't get canceled. It got scheduled for the worst possible moment at 10 times the size, usually when someone's already exhausted or scared. And by then, it's rarely even about the original issue anymore. It's about all the silence that piled up on top of it. Why didn't you tell me? How long has this been going on? I thought we were on the same page. That's not a money problem anymore. That's a trust problem wearing a money costume. This is the trap at the very center of the whole thing. The couples who fight most bitterly about money often aren't the ones who talk about it too much. They're the ones who didn't talk about it at all until it detonated. A regular, low-stakes, boring little money conversation isn't the thing that causes the fight. It's the thing that prevents it. Point 4. When couples do finally fight about money, listen closely, because it's almost never really about the money. The dollar amount is just the thing you can point at. Underneath it is always something older and deeper. Think about what money actually represents to a person. For one, money means safety, a buffer between their family and disaster, and every unplanned expense feels like the floor cracking. For another, money means freedom. The ability to choose, to say yes, to not feel trapped, and every budget feels like a cage. For someone else, it's respect, or love, or control, or proof that they're okay. So when one partner wants to save every spare dollar and the other wants to enjoy what they've earned, they think they're fighting about a purchase. They're not. They're two people with two completely different fears standing in the same kitchen, each convinced the other one just doesn't get it. The saver isn't cheap. They're scared. The spender isn't reckless. They're trying to feel alive or generous or free. Neither of them is wrong and neither of them is the villain. They're just speaking two different money languages that they each learned in childhood and nobody ever taught them to translate. This is why just make a budget almost never fixes a money fight. You can agree on a spreadsheet and still feel completely unsafe, unseen, or disrespected because the numbers were never the actual argument. The real conversation isn't, where did this money go? It's what are you afraid of, and what does money need to mean for you to feel okay? That's a very different conversation. It's slower, it's softer, and it doesn't end with a winner. But it's also the one that actually works, because it finally addresses the thing that was really on the table the whole time. Once you can hear the fear underneath your partner's number, You stop arguing with the number and start comforting the person. And that's when the fight quietly runs out of fuel. Point 5, and I want to be really fair here because it would be easy to swing too far the other way. When I say talk about money, I am not saying you owe every person in your life a full accounting of your accounts. Privacy is real. Tact is real. And there's a genuine difference between healthy privacy and harmful secrecy. So let's name it honestly. Not every relationship has earned access to your numbers. A brand new partner, a casual friend, a coworker. The boundary there is completely appropriate. Discretion isn't dishonesty. And even inside a committed partnership, some personal space around money can be healthy. A little room to buy a gift or a small treat without a committee meeting. Honesty doesn't mean you narrate every purchase or turn your marriage into an audit. That's not intimacy, that's surveillance, and it corrodes trust in its own way. So the goal here was never a spreadsheet striptease where you expose every figure to everyone. The goal is honesty where honesty actually matters, with the people whose lives are financially tied to yours. And there's a clean little test for the difference between healthy privacy and the kind of secrecy that quietly rots a relationship. Just ask yourself, would this survive being said out loud? A private treat you'd happily explain if asked is privacy. A purchase or an account or a debt you're actively hiding that you'd panic about being discovered. That's not privacy anymore. That's a secret. Same action, completely different weight, and the test tells you which one you're holding. Privacy protects a person. Secrecy protects a lie. Aim for the first and be honest with yourself about the second. Point 6, and this is the hopeful one. The reason any of this is worth the discomfort. The couples and the families who learn to talk about money plainly don't just feel closer. They quietly pull ahead of the people who stay silent and of their own past selves. Think about what a household actually gains when the silence breaks. Two people who can talk openly about money stop working against each other by accident. They stop making expensive, contradictory decisions in the dark. They can point at a shared goal and actually move toward it together instead of each rowing in a private direction. The money itself starts working better the moment it stops being a secret, because now there are two brains on it instead of 1.5. But honestly, the money is the smaller prize. The bigger one is what happens to the relationship. Because if the two of you can sit down and handle the single most loaded, most avoided subject there is, calmly, as teammates, without it becoming a war, then there is almost nothing left that you can't talk about. Money is the boss level. Clear it. And you've built something that carries into every other hard conversation you'll ever have. The health scare, the family drama, the big scary decision. That's the real return here. Not a spreadsheet that balances, but a partnership where nothing has to be hidden and no subject is off the table. And it starts smaller than you think. It starts with one plain, low-stakes conversation, which is exactly what I want to hand you right now. So here's the actual script. The opening line, the words to use, so you don't have to invent them in a tense moment. And the whole secret is this. Keep the first one absurdly low stakes. The reason money talks explode is that we save them up and then ambush each other with a huge loaded decision. So do the opposite. Make the first one so small it can't threaten anyone. Try this out loud to your partner this week. Hey, can we do a 20-minute money date sometime this week? No decisions, nothing's wrong. I don't want to change anything. I just think we'd both feel better if we talked about it out loud a little more often. We can get takeout, keep it easy. That's it. Notice what that line does. It names a small, bounded amount of time, so it doesn't feel like a life sentence. It says no decisions and nothing's wrong, which pulls the threat right out of it. And it frames the two of you as a team who'd both feel better, not one person putting the other on trial. You are not trying to solve your finances in one night. You're trying to make talking about money a normal, regular, unremarkable thing. A habit, not an event. Because once the conversation is normal, it stops being scary, and the huge fights simply stop showing up, because nothing gets a chance to pile up in the dark anymore. One small talk. That's the whole beginning. If today's the day the silence ends in your house, that sentence is how it starts. So I want to hear from you. Did your family talk about money when you were growing up? Yes or no? Just those 2 words in the comments. I read them, and I think the answers will surprise you. Quick and important note. This is education, not therapy or financial advice. For serious money conflict, debt, or a crisis in your relationship, please talk to a real professional, a counselor, or an advisor. Next time, we get specific about the very first fight almost every couple has. Yours, mine, or ours. How you actually split a life without splitting up over it. I'll see you there.